Okay, hello everyone. Let me adjust the volume real quick. It looks a little too high. Hello everyone. My name is Tina Dillard with Quilting Affection Designs, and I'm hoping you can hear me okay and see me okay. On my screen, I think you can see it, but I just want to make sure you're all. If you can give me a thumbs up or whatever for the sound, I appreciate it. I'm hoping you all are enjoying your day. I know I've been watching TV all morning, watching the Washington Capitals parade. It's nice to see DC finally get a championship that's been long overdue for them. I know I had some friends that went down and enjoying themselves. I was not going to go down to that madhouse today. The weather here is beautiful day today. Finally, I think the humidity is really low. Finally, so it's an enjoyable day. I haven't had the AC on for a couple days, so it's been nice. So today we are going to continue our series with the Quilting Basics 101, which has been our Quilt Talk Tuesday series for the last several weeks. We've gone through terms, basics. I'm reading off my list here. Doing the 9 patch, reading a pattern. We've gone through seam allowances, terminologies, quilting tools, fabric, cutting, half square triangles. Last week we went through and we pieced together this block. So this week is episode 21, and we are getting into how to put on borders on your quilt. We're going to take this block and we're going to pretend it's our quilt, and we're going to add a 1.5-inch border to it, and I'm going to show you how the correct way to put borders on. So we're going to be going through that. Next week we'll be talking about basting, how to sandwich quilts. There's several ways you can do things, so we'll be discussing that. But today, let's go ahead and get started with our borders. Before we begin, feel free at any time to leave a comment or question. Please post them in the sections below, or comment in the section below. And if you or you even share with your friends or into groups, other groups that you belong to that they think they may be important to, please feel free to share these videos. You can also check back to watch the other videos that we have done in the past. All you have to do is go into the video section, and I have a playlist of Quilt Talk Tuesday all set up and it's starting from 1 to the current one. So I've done that, and you can also catch me on YouTube also. So with that said, let's start with borders. So I'll move my mouse out of the way. What we're going to do first with borders, we're going to, like I said, we're going to take this block and we're going to pretend it's our quilt top. And the quilt top, we need to measure. So we're going to do the sides first, and then we'll do the top and the bottom. To do this correctly, you're going to take 3 measurements. You're going to take on the top, on the left side, you're going to take a measure. I have a 9.5. You're going to take one in the center, which is a 9.5. And you are also going to take one from the right edge, which is a 9.5. So you're going to need a 9.5-inch strips, 2 of them, one for the left side and one for the right side. So what I have done already is I've already cut out our 2-inch strips. All we have to do now is cut them to size. Just a second, let me grab my ruler and my rotary cutter. So I'm going to move this out of the way and we're going to go ahead and cut 2 strips that measure 9.5. So what we're going to do, the one edge needs to be trimmed completely to make it straight to start with. So I'm going to take this top one and I'm going to clean up the edge. I'm not going to do the bottom right now, I'm just going to do the top. And clean up the edge. Let me move this up so you can see. What I'm doing is I'm just cleaning up the edge so we have a nice straight edge. And I'm using the edge of our fabric here to do so. So now we have that out of the way. Now we need to measure a 9.5 inch strip. And we do now. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece here. Oops. There, finally got it. And now we have a 9.5 inch strip. So let's go ahead and do that again one more time. And I'm going to clean up my edge again. Let me move up. There we go. And straighten this out. So now I'm going to flip this around so it's a little easier for me to cut this time. And I'm going to measure a 9.5 inch strip. And I'm going to cut that out. Okay, so we got 2 strips that measure 9.5. Now with these measurements, we know we're going to be pretty much straight. So we're going to use some pins, and I'm going to rotate it this way. But what we're going to do first is I'm going to go to edge, and I'm going to create a small little center piece. And just pinch it a little bit to get a crease on this side. And I'm going to do the same thing with the fabric. But I'm going to have the wrong sides facing each other when I've creased this. Now I'm going to open it back up, and I'm going to take that crease and match it into the block crease, and I'm going to pin this down. Now I'm going to go to the end here and pin that down. And I'm going to this end also. So that's what we have for our first strip. I'm going to go ahead and go ahead and sew this. So we are going to go, and I'm going to take that, move my pins back over, and we're doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance like we normally do. And we're just going to begin sewing. and making sure that our edges match up. And continue on. So we now have one border on. You're going to press this towards the outside. And if you have any questions during this, I'm pressing right now, and if you have any questions, please feel free to leave any in the comment section. So we have our first border on. Now I'm going to do the same thing for this side. We're going to find the center. Match up our ends and gently press in the center of our block, which will be our quilt top. We have done that. Now we're going to take our wrong sides together of our strip of fabric for our border, and we're going to gently press that one also. So now we're going to go ahead and open that up, lay that down, and we are going to pin this again. Matching up that crease and pin. We're also going to do this for the end here. We're going to match up those ends and we're going to pin. We're also going to match up this ends and pin in the center here, and we're going to do it on the opposite side, and we're going to match up our seams, our edges, and pin. Now it's crucial to keep these nice and straight so you don't have a wobbly border when you go to quilt it. So now we're going to go ahead and just continue along, sewing our 1/4 inch seam allowance, adjusting if needed, making sure everything stays the same. Our pressing, we don't have a wobbly border going on, and we now have that done. So we've got our side borders on. Now it's going to take a little bit if you're doing a bigger quilt. You're going to need a bigger area, or it's going to take more time also. So that is something to consider. So I'm going to go ahead. I have an ironing board next to me, and I'm going to go ahead and press this one to the outside also. So now, just clean up the threads here and clean up the threads here. Now we're going to take 3 more knit measurements for the rest of this quilt. And those measurements are going to be the top, the center, and the middle again. Now we've added a border, so it wouldn't be 9.5, so we need to double check our numbers. We should be adding another a couple inches onto those. So let's go ahead and measure our border, and it looks like it's going to be a 12.5. The center is going to be 12.5. And the outer edge is going to be 12.5. So if you're doing a normal quilt, what you would do is between those three numbers, you would find the average and you use that number for your top and your bottom borders. Now you don't want to go ahead and just take a strip and that's longer than the fabric and sew that on. You're going to get a wavy border on that quilt when you do that. That's why you need to be precise in your measurements. I know it's difficult for bigger quilts, but getting an extra hand to measure makes a big difference. Laying it on a flatter surface also helps make it a little bit different, easier for getting your quilt to lay flat and measuring. So we know we need 12.5. So let's go ahead and let's move this out of the way and this out of the way and the tape measure. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to measure a 12.5-inch border strip. Now, I'm going to do two at a time. See if I can do two at a time right now. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. We'll do one at a time. This makes it a lot easier to measure. We're going to clean up our edge as we have done before. Now, my ruler, if I'm correct, is 12.5. So I'm going to flip this around for me, because I'm left-handed, and I'm going to line this ruler up directly on the ends, and I'm going to take my cut when I'm ready for 12.5 inches. I have one done. I'm going to set that one aside and go ahead and trim the top of this, and we are going to trim this, flip it around, and cut our second border. So now we have two 12.5-inch strips for our borders cut. So we're going to do the same thing as we have done before, and we're going to go ahead and find the center of this piece here. We're just lining up our edges, and we're going to go ahead and finger press this just slightly. Now we have done that, we're going to go ahead and take and do this with our right sides together and finger press this. So now we're going to go ahead and line up our ends again, our centers again, crease to crease, and pin. And we're going to line up our edges here and pin. And I'm going to go ahead and do that on this side also. And pin. So now I'm going to go back in between our center and our left and just gently tug a little bit to make sure everything, that we really don't have anything there. And we're going to do the same thing on this side. So now I have that done. Let's go ahead and sew this together. You're going to make sure your edges match up when you get started. And I really suggest, since this is our outer border, is taking a few stitches and then going back and reinforcing those stitches and then continue on forward. That way when you go to do your quilting, it won't unravel on you when you start to baste. And we're going to go ahead and continue on, making sure our seams are okay underneath and making sure our edges line up. And I'm going to make sure that seam is lined up okay underneath, because I could feel it was folded underneath wrong way. And we're going to continue on, making sure our edges line up so we don't have a wavy border. And I'm going to take that pin out, kind of tug on my other border to give it a little oomph. And I'm going to go back just a few stitches and then go back forward again. And we have our second border on. Again, but making sure you follow your directions. They may tell you to press them a different way, but for what we're doing here, we're going to press away from the block. And that's what your border will look like. So let me get a good press. Like I said, my ironing's over here, right next to us. So you're just going to give it a nice little press to make sure everything lays flat. And now we're going to, that's what this looks like. So now we're going to rotate it around and we're going to add our last border. So we're going to now, making sure everything lines up, hold that together and do our gentle press again. We're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again to make sure we get everything lined up right. And we're also going to do this for our border strip. And press together. So now we're going to open this up. And we are going to making sure our creases match up, which I think they do. I mean, they seem to be lining up okay. There we go. And now we're going to take and pin this edge. And we're going to pin this edge here. And we're going to pin in the middle. So now we're ready to do the last seam. So like I said before, we take a few stitches, reverse the stitch to reinforce it, and then continue on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And whoops, I forgot to go back, so we'll go ahead and do a long one and then go forward. Continue on. So we're making sure that everything lines up on the edge of our block and our border. Making sure those strips and block match up and line up correctly so we don't have a wavy border. So now we have completed, and I reinforced that stitch. As you can see, I reinforced it. I'm going to go ahead and trim that off, trim this up, the threads on that one, and I'm going to press it open like we have been before, away from the block. What problems are you having with your borders, Kristen? So when you, I'm waiting to see if she'll comment on that. If you have a border that needs to be pieced together because the fabric is just not too long, not long enough. What you could do, what I do, is take your fabric. You're going to do it like what you would do for a binding. And you're going to go ahead and lay your strips down like so. And you're going to draw. Let's see if I can find a pin that's close by. I need a white one. Okay. And we're going to mark a diagonal line. You're going to make sure that you're hanging over at least 1/4 inch on both sides. Draw a diagonal line across from where the point matches here on the strip that goes horizontal to the point that down here. And you're going to mark a line. And you're going to go ahead and pin that. You may want to pin it 2 or 3 times. For this one, I'm just going to do 1. And you're going to sew on that diagonal line. Stay on the diagonal line because you want to make sure everything matches up. And go ahead and pull it out. And what we're going to do now is go ahead and cut that away, 1/4 inch away. And we're also going to take the dog ears away also. Excuse me if my head gets in the way of the camera. Now I'm going to take this to my ironing board and press the seams open. Just like so. Now I'm going to do that real quick here. So now you have an extra long piece of strip fabric. So you can measure what you needed, your 12.5 or whatever size you need for your border of your quilt, and you will have an extra long piece. And that's how you would do that for a quilt that requires, if so you were doing a twin that requires longer than your width of your fabric. So basically that's how you put on borders for your quilt. So you're going to remember that you need to take measurements of your quilt several times. So you want to make sure you get your left edge, your middle, and your right edge first. And it depends on your quilt, on your quilt pattern also, because they may tell you to go do your bottoms first and then your sides. When I write my patterns, usually I'm doing it from your sides to your top. That helps. I think it helps square it up a little bit easier. So just remembering to take your measurements 3 times and making sure everything's flat when you're doing that. Maybe if you have a big quilt, asking for help for those measurements so you're not reaching and doing extra measurements here and there. You will get a nice even border on your quilt. So if you have any questions, I'm going to stay here for a few minutes. If you want to post them, please go ahead and do so. Let me move some of the stuff. You could see the block better. I didn't realize that I was blocking it. So that's what the borders look like. So next week we'll add, make a backing for it and put some batting underneath there and make a sandwich quilt, baste it. I'll show you how to do it for machine basting. So we'll be doing some machine basting, well, not basting, machine basting for your sandwich quilt for your machine. In the following week we'll be doing the machine quilting. So with that said, I haven't seen any more questions pop up or comments. Kristen, if you watch this again, please let me know what you're having problems with, and I will try to answer them for you. So with that said, we will be back next Tuesday as usual, and we'll be talking about sandwiching your quilt. So I want to wish you a wonderful week and happy quilting. See you next week for Quilt Talk Tuesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Mark your calendars, and I will see you then. Bye.